Well, hey, welcome to A Valid Answer with Scott and Marshall. It's Valid Answer Mondays, where we have a conservative capitalist pastor and a very sick and ill socialist liberal atheist who's feeling a little under the weather. I think your equipment's feeling a little under the weather too. We can't get your iPad to charge. And then you're kind of touching everything. So if you don't mind, just make sure you wipe everything down.
Oh, wow.
When you're done. We don't want those germs.
Well,
we don't want those atheist germs to, spread all over the place. So,
Wow. Friends like this, who needs enemies?
Right? Exactly. Well, hey, you know what that's like, right? So yeah, you're gonna wipe everything down for us and everything. So how you were a little ill? Tell us a little bit. I mean, we don't need the gory details, but
well, to put it simply, I came down with a man cold.
Oh my gosh, you must have been close to death.
Pretty much. I mean, think about it, right? There's childbirth, kidney stones, man cold.
Right. I was gonna say, as I understand, the man cold is like the one way where men can kind of get the idea of what it feels like to give birth.
Almost. When a woman gives birth, she can almost feel what it's like to have a man cold. Yeah. Right.
He's like, honey, I can't get out of bed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Wait a minute. Are we actively making fun of men right now?
I think we are.
Okay. Sorry about that. But again, that's politically correct. And you can't make fun of other people, but you can make fun of white men. So, hey, that's great.
Well, that's because of how power structures work, right?
If you like to say so.
But anyway, that's kind of off topic. Today, we're going to talk about something that's been in the news lately. We're going to be talking about the Green New Deal.
Green New Deal.
The Green New Deal.
Tell us a little bit about that, because this is like your glorious socialist utopia. That, I mean, you're drooling over this, and you just kind of here, Yeah, because this is what you live for. Tell us all about this. Tell us all about this dream.
Yeah. So basically, we take.
Well, that's our show for today. Sorry.
All right. So
let's start with that. All right. Well, while he's choking on the name of the socialist left-wing liberal Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez,
you guys are just losing your mind over here.
Yeah, she's just your darling, right?
Yep.
What did she propose? She just proposed a non-binding, worthless, effectively useless. I'm just throwing out my little punches
It's a resolution.
Yeah,
and
resolution.
The resolution is very vague. It's general intentionally. Mm-hmm. The idea is to
non-binding.
Get everybody kind of on board and to do what's called moving the Overton window.
Oh, I'm well aware of that.
Okay. So that's what's happening. So it has a few primary planks. Upgrading all existing buildings in the country for energy efficiency, working with farmers to eliminate pollution and greenhouse emissions, overhauling transportation systems to reduce emissions, expanding electric cars, guaranteed job with a family-sustaining wage, adequate family medical leave, paid vacations, and retirement security for every American, and high-quality health care for all Americans.
Sounds so wonderful.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. So
all provided by the government. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Sounds so wonderful. Carry on.
Well, that's it. That's basically what it encompasses. So we will go from the general to the specific later on. But by getting people to agree to these goals, then we can begin the hard work of working out the specifics and moving towards actually making these things happen.
Mm-hmm. So here's the thing that I find from what I've been watching people on the right and the left, but I probably have more feedback coming in from the right. Here's the thing that most people trip on, and I think it's the wrong thing to trip on. I think most of the people on the right are tripping on the details of, well, how are you going to pay for this? Or look at the timeline. That's not realistic. And all this kind of stuff, which is true. It's really ridiculous. Really, in 10 years, you think this is all going to happen. It's really dumb. Mm-hmm. But that's not the point. That's not that's the superficial point that everybody sees. That's the superficial, that's the distraction. That's the distraction, because again, someone like you will say, well, we can work out these numbers. We can do that and all this kind of stuff. We should not, as people on the right, should not be distracted by the superficial numbers and the superficial things of, well, how are we going to pay for that? This is going to cost us much. It's going to be trillions of dollars, because there's always going to be an answer for that. We need to focus on the fundamental problem with this. So I believe there is a fundamental problem with this idea of the Green New Deal, of how it's being presented, that dates back before the Green New Deal. It has to do more with the principle of it. So I'm going to come against the principle of it, but I want to give you a chance to lay this out and present this to everybody as you see it, as you see why is this so important that this happens.
Well, okay, so let's talk about the Overton window to begin with.
Yep.
That's sort of the immediate benefit of this plan. The Overton window is a term for the ideas which are socially acceptable for discussion in society. Mm-hmm. So this moves that window to the left, because now all of a sudden, instead of talking about becoming a carbon neutral society, perhaps even in the next 10 years, instead of that being just kind of this crazy pie in the sky, idea, it now becomes part of the mainstream discussion. Now, is it likely to happen? I don't think so. But it's possible. And certainly by moving in that direction, whether it takes us 10 years or 20 years, by moving in steps, eventually we get there, right? How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time, right?
So
this is sort of the first bite.
To summarize effectively what the Overton window is, it's a palatable way of saying a slippery slope.
No, I don't think it's a slippery slope
No,
at all.
that's exactly what the idea of the slippery slope is. Once you start down this way, it gets steeper and steeper and steeper. That's what the Overton window is. You move this and you shift this so that what once was unthinkable is now closer. You slide closer to what and it shifts either way, and it's a slippery slope either way.
Either way.
But when people make the slippery slope argument, this is what they're talking about. They don't want this to shift. They don't want the Overton window to shift, because once you shift this way, that makes that more palatable and makes you want to shift more. Then it makes you want to shift more. It makes it easier to shift more, which is the definition of slippery slope. People don't want to take that first step because they believe it's going to lead eventually to this. And that's what the Overton window is. That's what you're doing. You're pushing it that way to make that more palatable, so you can push it farther, so eventually you get there. Eventually, do you want the Overton window all the way over to the left? Eventually, do you want the Overton window all the way to the left?
I don't know what you mean by all the way. Do I want
Doesn't matter. Do you want it to keep sliding to the left?
From where it is now?
Yes. Then that's a slippery slope. That's the definition of slippery slope. Not
necessarily completely to the left either.
Either way, that's still the definition of slippery slope. Once you push it, once you start pushing that window that way, you start sliding that way. It's harder to push back.
I think there are things to put the movement of the window in check. And at the end of the day, again, this is what is socially acceptable in public discourse. Mm-hmm. And so we are bringing these things into the realm of public discussion. And I think it's critical that we do so.
Why are you so afraid of the idea of the slippery slope?
Well, because it's a logical fallacy. And I think you're conflating the logical fallacy with the Overton window. I disagree with your take on it, personally.
How? Can you explain what's wrong? How is it different?
Because it's not a logical fallacy. The Overton window is actually a thing. It's an actual thing, and it does move. But there are forces which also pull it back to the right.
Right. A slippery slope, you can still go back. A slippery slope, it's the idea. Again, I'm dealing with the idea. We're dealing with
logic versus public discourse. So you're bringing up a logical fallacy, which has a specific definition.
What is
in
that?
Logic. Well, basically, let's look it up rather than me try to paraphrase.
Yeah.
But basically, it's when you say one thing will lead to another, lead to another, lead to another, therefore we should not do it. That is a slippery slope fallacy because it's an error in logical thinking. And the reason is it ignores the fact that there are checks that may prevent things from progressing all the way to the extreme.
So the idea is that slippery slope means that if you take this step, it will lead to here, so we shouldn't take this step. And that's the fallacy. The fallacy is one step does not equal the final step.
Exactly.
Okay, all right.
Exactly.
But the Overton window effectively accomplishes that. It continues to push a direction so that it can eventually get to a destination.
Mm-hmm.
So the Overton window is the accomplishing of the fear. The fear is the fear. The logical fallacy is the fear that if you take one step, it leads by default all the way to this. That's the fear. But the shifting of the Overton window makes that fear a reality to the people who see it shifting.
Well, you'll have to manage your fears, because if you want something to be afraid of, let's talk about economic inequality, and let's talk about greenhouse emissions. Ocasio-Cortez, as I understand, made an unfortunate comparison, or I think she compared climate change to World War II. Okay. Yeah. And that's what I heard. I don't have it in front of me, but I'm going to.
She said this is our World War II.
Yeah.
And then everybody jumped stupidly on there and said, we've already had World War II. It's like, that's not what she was saying.
Right.
She was saying this was she wants this to be the driving event of this generation that drives us a direction, like World War II was a driving event of that generation.
Correct. And I applaud you giving her credit for trying to interpret what she means versus what she actually said. I don't like the way she conflated the two personally. Mm-hmm. World War II was, an unimaginable collection of horrors. And I hope that we never experience anything like that.
Right. No, ever. And I don't believe that is something that that she was
saying. However, greenhouse emissions, climate change in particular, the result of greenhouse emissions, man-made greenhouse emissions, is going to have an impact on the planet the likes of which we have not seen since World War II. In other words, the threat from climate change is very real, and it's very substantial. And it will probably be decades before we start to really feel the harshest effects.
It's funny. That's what they said decades ago, too.
But, hey, it's already ramping up. The ramp up has been predicted, and we're starting to see it. Take a look. Even the Earth, the past 10 years, I think like 5 or 7 of the past 10 years have been the hottest on record ever. And, when you take a look at...
We've been keeping records throughout all of history.
Well, these are the records certainly in the last, it's a little over a century now. We have over a century of climate records. And, we're experiencing rapid heating of the planet, both the air and the oceans. In fact, the oceans are absorbing 90% of the heat that is coming into the planet. So the oceans are warming up at an alarming rate. And this is causing species to shift. There's sea snakes now off the California coast occasionally, where before that really never happened.
That we knew of. We don't say never happened, because Josh Gunderson says ice core samples hot. Yeah, I know. And those ice core samples reveal times when it was hotter.
That's correct.
That's why I was saying, really, as far back as we can go, because if you actually look back as far back as we can look in ice core samples, there was times when it was hotter.
But there's something that you're missing there, Scott, and it's the rate of climate change. It's the hockey stick, if you will. The fact that when you look at the ice cores and you look at the hotter temperatures,
have we reached that hockey stick?
Oh, yeah, we're in it.
That he said 20 years ago it would be like this. Are we there?
We're in it.
Are we actually where he said we would be? Are we actually where he said we would be in the time that he said?
I don't know the answer to that, Scott, offhand, but I do know that we're not moving in the right direction. Here's what you have to understand: the pace of climate change. So when you look at the historical, the ancient, the prehistoric climate record, right? Okay. Yes, the Earth was hotter, but it became hotter over a very long time period, over thousands and thousands of years. We are seeing what should normally take place over tens of thousands of years packed into less than a century of warming. And when that happens, natural selection, the natural processes in the planet that adapt to the changes in the Earth's climate, cannot keep up.
How do we know?
So we get mass extinctions. Well, because we know from all of the records that we have from history. We can, again, not only the ice cores, which gives us the time, the place, and the temperature from prehistoric times, but we can also look at the fossil record, and we can see, when the Earth has suffered mass extinctions. Planet Earth has had 5 mass extinction events where nearly 90% of the life on the planet perished.
Are you saying the Earth has survived through it all?
Well, We are now in the 6th.
Right, but you're saying the Earth has survived through extinction level events?
The Earth will survive. The Earth will survive. It will survive
Earth
us.
will survive. Got it.
But will we? And that's what this comes down to, because as climate shifts, as things change, as sea levels rise, as populations, especially along the coast, are displaced, as coral reefs die, as fish stocks perish, there's going to be increased conflict on this planet over dwindling resources.
Mm-hmm.
And that is going to lead to conflict, to war. And I don't know if it will be World War II scale, but it will certainly be just as horrific as any battle fought during World War II. In that a lot of people are going to die because people are going to fight to control resources. And so climate change is a pretty serious thing, and we need to work on the greenhouse emissions if we are to hold climate change in check. So we're responsible for the problem. We're changing the Earth's climate.
I don't know that we are.
Well, scientists know that we are.
A lot of scientists disagree.
No, a lot. No, there's more consensus on anthropogenic climate change than there is probably on anything with the exception of human evolution.
Mm-hmm.
So Big Bang, human evolution, and
But again,
climate change are three things
Climate
where...
change science is all based on models. It's all based on prediction.
Mhm, and the models...
And the predictions haven't happened.
The models,
Every time they make a prediction, it doesn't happen.
I understand. And the models are imprecise because the Earth is
And that's
incredibly complex.
Now we're going to change gears because that's the science your side wants to use to control people. That is the fundamental. Now I'm going to come in on my side. That is the fundamental disagreement that I have with this Green New Deal and the whole idea behind it, which is the basic idea that there is a small group of people who are smarter than you, who's going to tell you how to live your life. And the evidence that they're using is predictions that most of the time are wrong. It's models that are flawed. You just said it. Models that are flawed and predictions that are wrong. That's the science that they are counting on to control how you live because they think they're smarter than you and they think they should have the right because they're smarter to tell you how to live. That's the principle of this whole thing that I absolutely disagree with. The principle that there is a group of people who are smart and smarter than the rest of you who should have the right to tell you how to live and how to live your life.
I don't know that scientists are telling us how to live our life.
No, that's what I'm saying. The politicians are using scientists to tell you how they want you to live.
Brenda Lopez Bergdart points out the fish are disappearing due to man overfishing, plundering the seas, and that's exactly correct. Brenda and I don't see eye to eye. She probably agrees more with you on many things, but at least here I agree with her on this.
But that's the fundamental problem that I have with this whole line of thinking. It's not the detail. How are you going to pay for it? That's the time. It's the idea of there's a group of people who think they're smarter than you who want to tell you how to live your life. That's what I have a problem with.
Let's say a doctor gives a patient a terminal diagnosis, and the patient outlives the terminal diagnosis by a year, or even 2 or 3 years. Does that mean the doctor is fundamentally wrong if the patient outlived the diagnosis? At the end of it all, the patient still passes away. And that's what these guys are telling us. They're saying, look, we're not 100% sure what the timeline is.
But they're sure enough to tell you how to live your life.
Well, absolutely. Absolutely.
So it's the doctors telling the patient, saying, not my suggestion, I'm now going to make law to tell you what you're going to eat, how you're going to live, what you're going to do. That's the control I'm talking about that I don't agree with.
But what do you do when the Earth's resources become limited? What do you do?
You find a way to convince people to make better choices, but you don't force it.
Okay. Are you familiar with Easter Island?
Yeah, a little bit. I know that it exists, and I understand that kind of the history behind it, that they basically just out-farmed what was there and all died off because they basically ate up all the resources.
They ate everything.
Yeah. They
ate everything on the island. So Easter Island is it's known for the statues that stand up, the big heads that stand up out of the ground. They actually put them on platforms.
Well, they actually go deeper into the ground than they are out of the ground or something like that. They're really, really deep.
Not necessarily, but they do have platforms that they're erected upon. They were carved out of the volcanic rock or whatever, slid down the hills and erected, It's sort of this crazy thing. How did these Polynesian Stone Age people essentially
Aliens.
create, these statues, and why did they do it, and why did they tear it up? But when Polynesian settlers arrived on Easter Island about 1,000 years ago, the island was completely covered with forest. It was a lush green expanse. And then they began to cultivate the island and farm it, and they overfarmed it, and they overfished the waters, which weren't very good for fishing to begin with. Mm-hmm. And eventually, they resorted to eating the trees on the island. And at some point, somebody on the island ate the very last tree on the island. They literally cut it down to create a sort of flour to make a dough to make a bread. And that was it. And when that last tree was cut down, all that was left was each other. Mm-hmm. And it's believed they resorted to cannibalism. And when European explorers arrived shortly after all of this collapse and chaos had broke out, they found a society that was a skeleton of its former self. And the people were ripe for enslavement. Mm-hmm. So that's the problem with ecological or Malthusian collapse. If we don't create laws and tell people, no, you may not pull the last fish out of the darn ocean, unless we do this, then people will continue to do it, because there's no persuasion that you're going to be able to use to stop a person from doing what they're going to do. What's this? This is your cell phone. Mm-hmm. All right, what are you trying to tell me, Scott?
You realize, you know how recyclable this phone is?
I don't know how recyclable it is.
Very.
Okay,
Apple specifically makes it out of aluminum so that it's recyclable, makes it out of actual glass that's recyclable. It's mercury free. I watch every single Apple keynote address when they're introducing, and that's a big thing they say about their iPads or for everything they make. They specifically go out of their way to make things that are highly recyclable because they believe that. Good. That is their belief. Good. I don't, that's great. It makes it more expensive because you're not buying cheap plastic and oil products and all that kind of stuff. It's mercury free. It's BFR free. I don't even know what that means, but I hear it in every single one of the things. But you know what they did? They marketed it to be such a good product that the majority of the people in the world buy an eco-friendly phone because they marketed it to be the best. They didn't have to force people. They didn't have to write laws. They marketed it to be the best, and they are actually accomplishing your goal in a marketable way. Writing laws is a cheap, cheating way that you can't make your ideas palatable to everybody, so you're just going to force them down everybody's throat. The answer is make your solutions marketable. Find a way to convince people that this is the right thing to do. Apple has done it. All of their products are marketable, excellent products that people spend extra money to buy because of how good they are and because of how recyclable and all that. They have made an expensive product marketable, an expensive green product marketable. Mm-hmm. Nobody else wants to do that. Politicians don't want to do that. Nobody has the patience to actually make something great. Nobody would have a problem converting to solar or wind power if it did a better job than what is open currently. So if you can make a better product, put your focus on that. Make a better product. Make it the thing that everybody wants to get. They'll pay extra for it. You make a good enough product, they'll do it. That's capitalism leading the way to green to make a better product. The cheap, cheating way and the lazy way to do it is simply to say, you know what, we're just going to write it into law. We're just going to force you to do it. We're going to force you to do something that is not enjoyable to you. We're going to force you to do something that takes away your liberties. We're going to force you to do this thing for this end instead of finding a better way to do it, instead of finding a product, developing a product like Apple has. That's the way to do it. You don't force people. You don't write into law. You don't force people at gunpoint to live a lifestyle that you want them to. You make the product palatable and you make it great, and people will choose it on their own.
I'm glad you have such incredible faith in capitalism and the free market. But when you look at the broad history of capitalism and the free market, it is hardly benevolent. In fact, I've said this many times, it's sociopathic. Because the entire purpose of the way capitalism works is you extract profits. You extrude profits from absolutely everything. You monetize everything, and you extract profits. regardless of ethics or anything else, you simply extract profits. That's the goal of capitalism. And when we look at the history of capitalism, it doesn't always do this in a way that's certainly not eco-friendly. You know, you have strip mines, you have clear-cut forests, you have all of these things, and they're still happening. I mean, right now they're about to open the Amazon to logging, even though it's on native lands, Native American lands down in the Amazon forest. The president there is opening up that land, and he doesn't care about the native people. And the fact that Apple is doing this is fantastic, but you know, what about everybody else? Where would we be, for example, with cars and automobile emissions if the government hadn't set emissions standards starting way back in probably the 60s or 70s?
Again, it's the lazy way to do it. It's the lazy way to do it.
We don't have time to sit here and wait for the free market to adapt. You know, it's going to be Mad Max before we get to any kind of agreement that we have to adapt. You know,
again, I'm against the principle of it, with the idea being, well, there's not enough time, so let's go ahead and, you know, cut corners. There's not enough time to, you know, everybody has a problem with the president saying that. There's not enough time to have to deal with Congress. I'm just going to write an executive order. Is that fine with you? There's not enough time to go through all this, so it's okay for him to write an executive order and bypass Congress?
Is that a legal use of his authority?
I don't know. Is it?
If it is, then I can't have a problem with it. If we don't like it, we'll change that law. But sometimes that's what you have to do. What Ocasio-Cortez and other people are trying to illustrate to you is this is a serious issue. This is what the scientists at NASA are trying to communicate to you. I've put a link to the nasa.gov climate change website already in our comments.
Yes, Josh, tax incentives are also lazy measures.
You know,
anything that's not producing a better product is a lazy measure to control people.
The capitalist free market left to its own devices is sociopathic. It's only concerned with profits. It's not concerned with human well-being. It's not concerned with environmental preservation. And government
entities left on their own are completely utopian.
But if the government answers to the people, and the people insist that the government,
because that's what history shows us,
step in and protect them from the predation of private capitalist interests, and the government will do that and has done so many times in the past. Take a look at the tobacco industry, which for years fought the idea that smoking was dangerous, despite the fact that they literally had research and studies saying, oh, wow, this is really bad. It's killing people.
Yeah, they also had doctors saying it's good for you.
Yes,
scientists saying it's good for you.
Yeah, well, again, you know, that's because of a lack of ethics. You know, they headhunted for unethical physicians who would make these statements. And, you know, there you go. But when you take a look at the world's climate scientists, when you have over 90% of the world's climate scientists saying that global warming is being caused by human activity, and it's not just climate scientists in the United States or those on the NASA payroll, but they're literally scientists around the globe, that's something that we have to pay attention to. And when you look at the data...
Do you ever follow the money with science?
Really?
No, I'm just asking.
Scientists are not particularly well paid individuals.
So the idea, every time you say, hey, follow the money, that doesn't apply to scientists? That doesn't apply to grants? That doesn't apply to the scientific community?
But this whole argument that scientists are somehow being paid off, I've heard this argument before. There's absolutely no evidence to substantiate it.
No. I'm not saying scientists are being paid off.
Okay.
That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about there's money in certain science. There's money to be made if you're studying these certain things. There's money that can be made that people will support you based on, you know, if your conclusions match what they want to pay.
You have to feed your family. You have to eat. Okay. You do a job. You do the job well, you should expect, you know, to be paid for that job.
Have you ever thought to follow the money?
The fact that you're being paid doesn't mean that your ethics are compromised.
But have you ever thought to follow the money in science?
Yeah, and what I found is there's just not a lot of money in climate science. I don't know of any climate scientists who are living in gated communities making, you know, fortunes off promoting climate science. And again, this is not just scientists in the United States, this is scientists all around the world. You know, to suggest that the world's, I mean, the
again,
whole
Josh,
way
sorry, Jackie,
works,
I don't know. Yeah, Jackie's asking, I don't know. I'm saying, have you ever asked the question?
Yes,
okay.
and it's no, that's an empty argument. There's no evidence there to substantiate the fact that the world's scientists have been
Because you've looked into it.
But on the other hand, people arguing that climate change is not a problem, the tiny group of scientists, well, these people are on payrolls, and that's why we've had an investigation. And I think Chevron in particular recently got in trouble because we found that they suppressed climate change evidence and that they were aware that greenhouse emissions, were contributing to climate change. I'm sorry, I'm sick, so I'm just not with the program today. Anyway, the bottom line is, are we going to side with the world's scientists who are mostly middle-class individuals who are working at the world's universities, and 90% of them agree? And they agree in a field where you make your reputation by cutting down the work of other scientists, by saying, oh, no, you're wrong. That's how peer review works in science. Or are we going to believe, that the small band of millionaires and billionaires are unraveling this conspiracy of the world's scientists, and that there's actually no danger to humanity? Now, where you have an argument where I would agree with you is the whole idea that government is going to tell us how to live. That, I think, is your ground.
And that's all that I'm really that's all that I'm really standing on. I don't care about all the other details. I mean, I do care, but the other details aren't what's going to win the argument for the right. It's the principle of somebody thinking they're smarter than you and that they have the right to tell you how to live your life. I will never agree with that. Even me as a pastor who says I believe God is smarter than you and should have the right to tell you how to live, and you should, but that's a personal decision you should make. I don't want a government that's going to force that on you, because then once the government's forcing it on you, it's no longer even a personal choice. And that completely misses the point of why Jesus died for you, why God sent Jesus to die for your sins. It's a personal choice that you have to make. Faith is a personal choice. It's a personal relationship with Christ. So I don't want a government telling you to follow the Bible. I don't want the government telling you to follow these rules. I mean, literally, that was part of my message yesterday when I spoke. Legalistic Christianity doesn't work. It just breeds rebellion. You have to have a relationship. And that's what Christianity is. That's what being a Christ follower is having a relationship with Jesus. So I believe that you should have a relationship with Jesus. I believe there is a way that God wants you to live. I do not believe that a government should be set up to tell you, because we think we're smarter than you, how to live your life. And that's the fundamental thing that I come down to. And that's the fundamental basis that I stand on when I say shifting this Overton window this direction will bring us closer to the elites telling you how to live your life.
But aren't they already telling you how to live your
life?
life?
Well, yeah, they're going that way. They didn't used to. But I want to fight against it. Yes, they're starting to. Yes, I don't want it. Yes, they are starting to do that. I want to move it back.
They're already giving you your opinions through the media. Your opinions are fed to you. What you will believe in is fed to you in the media, whether you watch CNN or Fox. What you will believe is fed to you in the corporate media. And what you will put into your body is predicated by the pharmaceutical industry, by the food industry, by all of these industries. What you'll put in your body and what options you have are predicated by them. And try criticizing your employer in public, you'll lose your job. You're already being told how to live and what to do.
But I still have the choice.
Do you really?
Still have the choice.
If
yes,
you lose
I left
your job,
I left a job, and I have a new job in a place that I feel is better. And if I need to, I can start my own job if I want to. I can start my own company. I have the freedom to do that. I can work for who I want to work for. I can better myself, and I can get better at something than the person next to me and make myself valuable to be hired by a better company. I can do that. That's my choice.
But
my choice.
Do you think that is a reasonable option for most people, especially people who don't have a college education?
That is the reasonable. I don't have a college education.
Yes, you do. Yes, you do. You have the equivalent.
Come on.
You're a pastor. You had to go to Bible college, right?
No.
How did you become a pastor?
I became a pastor. I did polity courses, so yes, I did. But there were specific
so you took courses.
But I didn't go to college. But I'm saying I don't have a college degree.
But you have the equivalent.
Fine, then you can get the equivalent. You can go out and get the equivalent. It's still your choice. Yes, that is the best option for everybody, because that's the option of liberty. That's the option of independence. That's the option of freedom for you to make your choice, not for someone to make the choice for you.
Well, are you willing to play Russian roulette with humanity's future? If all of the scientists say we have 100 years to get this problem under control, and it may mean that we have to
I don't trust their estimate. Their estimates have not been right in the past.
Okay,
It
your answer is yes.
It is an estimate that has been wrong, that governments are trying to co-opt to control the people.
So your answer is yes. You're okay on a matter of principle playing Russian roulette with humanity's future.
I guess that's probably the best way to say it.
Well, this is where you and I are going to fundamentally disagree.
Because you want to control people and I want people to be free.
No,
even if freedom leads to their own destruction.
Yeah, see, I'm not going to accept that.
You're willing to control them.
I am not going to allow humanity
You are willing to
suffer
control them.
an existential disaster.
Why can't you say it?
Say what?
You're willing to control people.
If that is what it takes to prevent the extinction of all humanity, then yes, unfortunately, that's right.
And I'm not. As long as we get down to that basis, no, I am not willing to control people.
So whether it's in 100 years or 2 or even 300 years, you're okay with humanity being extinct as long as they have the freedom to choose.
And I believe they have a freedom to choose, and I believe that there are other ways that we can make it. There are other ways that we can do it than controlling people. I believe the other ways exist, and I am willing to take the chance that people find those other ways instead of controlling people.
If Easter Island had a centralized government that managed the island's resources, the civilization might not have collapsed.
And Josh, no, the ice caps are not receding. The edges are receding. NASA has shown that the center, that there is actually more mass of ice. Look it up. There is more mass of ice than there was in the past. That the edges are receding and the center is growing. Look it up.
Well, we are losing ice, and the ice caps, particularly in Antarctica, are melting from the underside.
And Jackie, no, I am a Christian.
Which is destabilizing the ice shelves, and in which case we may end up with a situation where an entire glacier or ice shelf literally just slides right off into the ocean and melts. And again, this is contributing to sea level rise. Sea levels are rising around the globe, and they're rising very quickly. And in 100 years, we can expect many places around the world, to be inundated with water and to become unlivable. There are Pacific islands which are now functionally unlivable because of sea level rise.
Now, I want to correct something here, Jackie. She's saying then you're not a real Christian because you're supposed to look out for others. Yes, I'm supposed to look out for others and help them, but I'm not saying that a government needs to force people to live a certain way. That's the difference. A Christian doesn't say the government needs to step in and force people to live a certain way. A Christian says, I will go myself and help that person. So don't conflate those two, Jackie. Don't go and say that I'm suddenly not a Christian because I don't want to control people. Get your definitions right. I'm a Christian. I'm going to help people. I'm going to reach out for people. I'm going to help them better themselves, but I'm not going to stand for a government that's going to force them to live a certain way.
Brenda points out the earth is in constant change. It always has been. And you're correct, Brenda. The key difference here is the pace of that change, the rate of the change. Earlier. So when the change happens over perhaps a few decades or 100 years, when it should be happening over thousands of years, nature simply cannot keep up with that rate of change.
Well, it basically comes down to what we just said.
You're willing to gamble and play Russian roulette.
I'm willing to let people be free and live the consequences of their choices. You're willing to control people for their own benefit.
Yeah, hey, I'm going to put that warning label. You hate warning labels? I love them.
Yeah, that's basically what it comes down to. That's why I say these discussions, we're not talking about they can't afford it. It's going to cost trillions of dollars. No, we got to get down to the basis so that you understand what's going on. To really understand, do you stand on the side of freedom, even if that means people suffer the consequences of their choices, or do you stand on the side of control? That means that you're willing to control people for their greater good. I will always stand on the side of letting people be free, even if that means they have to suffer their consequences, because that's what freedom is. That's what independence is. And I will always stand for the side of freedom and independence because that's what God did. As a Christian, as a pastor, I have to stand on the side of freedom and independence because God says, here is the freedom. Here is this free gift. If you accept it, here is eternal life. If you reject it, there's consequences for that, but it is your choice. So I will always stand on the side of individual choice. So,
right. And I'm not willing to gamble with, all of humanity's future for the sake of some kind of convoluted idea of freedom. To me personally, it's this nebulous, vague excuse that means we are not allowed to regulate the people who are polluting the planet. I do want to answer one more question here. Brenda asked, how do we know emissions are causing the rapid change, if it is rapid? We certainly know it's rapid because, again, we can look at the climate record. But we also know that they're human emissions because carbon dioxide released by human emissions has a different isotope than carbon dioxide released in the atmosphere by natural processes such as volcanic eruptions. And so we can measure the ratio of human, carbon isotopes versus the natural ones, and we find that we are contributing significantly. In all, human emissions are actually small compared to the natural output, but Earth is capable of taking up the natural output. But then when you add the human emissions on top, and then you cut down half of the Earth's rainforests, and you destroy half of the planet's lungs and our ability to produce oxygen, now all of a sudden this has an outsized impact on the climate. This begins to accumulate more and more, and I think we're now well over 500 parts per million in the atmosphere, which is a pretty substantial figure. And that rate of increase is accelerating, and it is on the hockey stick. And again, I put the link to the graph in the comments above in the article here.
So, hey, this is what we do. A pastor and atheist come together, and we get to the core of the discussion, not the surface, and not. So that's just what it comes down, and that's when you find out. You know what? It's we're not evil. We're not against each other. We're not hateful. It's just we have different perspectives, and our perspectives drive all the other things that we see, and all the other things that we choose, and all the other things that we prop up, and the things that we want to promote, and all that kind of stuff come from our basic principles, and that's what I wanted this discussion to be about, not about the whatever, if she's ditzy or whatever, what
she's young and inexperienced.
But that's not what this discussion was about.
She gaffes at a lower rate than Donald Trump. So.
Yeah, totally. But hey, this has been A Valid Answer with Scott and Marshall talking about the Green New Deal. You can catch us here on A Valid Answer on Facebook, Kerncast on Facebook on Sunday nights at 5, Mondays at 4. Until next time, stay safe out there, and breathe easy
and stay
if
warm.
you can.
Thank you.